Welcome to this brand new lesson, and this time we're going to step away from split type because we've dedicated a few modules to that specifically, and we're going to talk about another SVG or text effect in the context of the SVG. So if I scroll down, we kind of have this very cool cutout here that says ocean with, extremely condensed letter spacing to make it interesting and kind of thick so that you can see what's happening in the actual video behind it. But what's cool is behind, this is a mask essentially. This is an SVG text mask. So it's a cutout. Anything behind this text, which is SVG text, you'll be able to see, which is really, really cool. It opens up a world of possibilities. One of the cool use cases is to have video behind it, and because you want to have movement or something behind it. Otherwise, you could just use plain text. So I'm going to show you how to do this, and let's get started. So our starting point is actually this file right here, and it's blank. We don't see anything yet. So if you open up the before folder, you're going to see all this right here. So of course, lately we're just starting with some smooth scroll with Linus. We have scroll trigger and GSAP imported. And here is our HTML. Let's talk about that real quick. We have an empty section because we want to scroll into this. Then we have a section here. Now, there's a few things that are important about this right here, the setup. You definitely want to make sure that you have preserve aspect ratio, Y mid, X mid, X mid, Y mid. That's a tricky attribute to try to describe, so I'm not even going to try to describe it, but it does have to do with trying to make your SVG responsive and fluid. So just understand that. We may cover this in a later chapter in this course. Then we have our defs attribute where you put in your mask. All right, now we can see the text right here. There's a text element. You can't use this in regular HTML, but since we're working within an SVG, we can. And you can specify actual text in an SVG. And we can style it with CSS as well. So for instance, you see this text selector here. Well, if we have our SVG where you're working within Sass, you'll see our text element right here. So we can specify a custom font weight, text transform, etc., etc., etc. Another very important element here is going to be this rect right here. This rect right here, if we look at the CSS, we're giving it a fill of white, and then we're using the mask property with the URL of the ID mask. And the ID of mask is right here. All right, so that's what defines this ocean type as being a mask, essentially. And we're applying it onto this rectangle right here, which is, it fills up the whole area, a width of 100% and a height of 100%. Now this fill, you can't make it any color you want because it just won't work, but I'll show you that in a second. So in order for us to see behind the actual text mask at this point in time, let's just give this a background that's not white. Let's just do gray. So if I save that, you'll see if we start over, we have a gray background, and then we see the SVG, this white part. And then we can see anything behind it right here, which is this ocean graphic, or ocean type rather. So we could put anything literally behind this, like with position absolute or not. As long as this is position absolute with a higher Z index, then it'll sit on top of whatever you put in the background. And so one of the coolest ways, like I said, is just to put a video back there. So I'll show you that. I did not include the video HTML here. So the video HTML, I'm going to paste this in, is right here. So we have a video ID, or a video element rather, and then we have all these attributes that say autoplay, plays inline, it's muted, we want to loop it, we want to preload, and poster, there's a custom poster graphic. We're just referencing a URL that somebody has already uploaded, like a poster for while it loads, and then we have a WebM version of this video, and then also an MP4 version. So two sources inside of the video. If we save this, and we go back, look at that. That's because if we take this away, so let's say, for instance, we get rid of this SVG, save it. That's all it is. It's literally just positioned with CSS. So if I go over here and we look at video, this is the positioning. width of 50 viewport width. I didn't want it to be extremely wide because it got kind of pixelated and we didn't need it to be big. Position absolute, z-index -1, so it's behind the mask. Top 50, and this kind of just centers it right here. So let's bring back this stuff right here. And there we go. Now you could just leave it like this and that's fine. But just to get more practice here with a scroll trigger, let's try to make it fade in and come out, or fade in and kind of just like grow in from a scale of like 0.5 or something like that. So let's do that. But the actual purpose of this particular video here is to show you that you can create SVG mask text and then put stuff behind it, which is, you know, it's just one more tool in your toolkit as a front-end developer of these highly interactive modern front ends that you can use where appropriate. So let's go over here. The first thing that we're going to do, oh, and also, by the way, I forgot to mention this. For this video right here, here's a little JavaScript snippet that you can use. So const video, document query selector video, that's simple enough. Let's move this and get this situated correctly. Now what we say is if window match media method prefers reduced motion, then we're going to remove the attribute of autoplay and we're going to pause it as well. So that's just an accessibility thing that makes sense to utilize when you're working with video on websites. So we don't need a timeline for this because it's going to be a simple scroll trigger tween. And I wanted to do this because we've used scroll trigger a lot already, but only in the context of a timeline, not a simple tween. And it just behaves the same way, but we might as well do it. So we're just say gsap from, and we're going to say text. So yes, we can actually specify the actual SVG attributes in here, like this attribute right there. So we want to get access to that, and we want to animate that. Now first, we're going to do a scroll trigger. Now, if this was at the very top of a website, like this effect, you wouldn't have to have a scroll trigger, by the way. So use this when necessary. We're assuming this is further down on a web page, and we want to animate it based on scroll. So the trigger itself is going to be the SVG container. The start is going to be top center. The end is going to be bottom 20%. And we're going to do a scrub of 2. All right, so it's going to take 2 seconds for it to scrub through the animation. This would be a scrub-based animation. We put a comma here. We're going to say it's going to come from 0.5. I didn't want it to go from 0 because it just seemed too in your face. Let's put a comma there. Opacity will be 0. Transform origin, and we could set this, you know, in CSS, but we're just going to put it here. Duration will be 2 seconds, and then ease will be power 4 out. All right, so let's give this a shot and see what happens. Scroll up, refresh. There we go. Because it's scrub, you can see it'll stop right here, but because this is not a bunch of text and this is more of like a graphic, it's completely fine to make this based on a scrub animation. And by the way, that gray up there is pretty ugly, so let's get rid of that, save it. Presumably you'd have content here, not a bunch of white space. We scroll down, ocean, and then we see the actual movie behind it. So now you have another tool in your developer skill set, or your tool set rather, to create awesome interfaces.